A shadow moved for decades, leaving a trail of unimaginable sorrow. This shadow was Pedro Alonso Lopez, known to the world by names that reflected the sheer scale of his actions, the monster of the Andes. His story is not one of simple evil, but a chilling chronicle of a life forged in brutality, which in turn unleashed a torrent of brutality upon the most vulnerable. His journey through Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru became a dark odyssey of predation, a testament to how a broken soul can become a vessel for profound and systematic cruelty. The origins of his path can be traced back to a childhood of horrific deprivation and abuse. The seventh of 13 children, in a poverty-stricken family in Tolima, Colombia, his early life was a nightmare. His mother, a prostitute, was abusive, and his home was a place of constant violence. The defining trauma of his youth occurred when he was only 8 years old. After being caught sexually assaulting his younger sister, he was kicked out of his home and left to fend for himself on the streets. It was there, alone and vulnerable, that he was preyed upon. An older man abducted him, repeatedly sodomized him, and ultimately sold him into a form of servitude. This period of systematic abuse shattered any remaining fragments of his childhood and instilled in him a deep-seated rage and a twisted perception of power and sexuality. He eventually escaped and spent his formative years drifting, joining a street gang and surviving through petty crime. This culminated in his imprisonment for car theft. It was within the brutal confines of a Colombian prison that the final, monstrous transformation took place. He was brutally gang-raped by 4 older inmates. In a desperate act of survival and retribution, he crafted a shiv and, over the course of several days, hunted down and murdered all 4 of his assailants. This act of bloody vengeance was a turning point. It was the first time he had killed, and in the prison's violent ecosystem, it earned him a twisted kind of respect and a reputation for ruthlessness. Upon his release, he was no longer just a victim of circumstance. He was a predator who had discovered the ultimate expression of power through taking life. His campaign of terror began in earnest in Peru. He traveled there, moving through small, isolated villages where poverty was rampant and official oversight was minimal. It was here that he developed the method that would become his horrifying signature. He targeted young girls, typically between the ages of 8 and 12. He saw them as pure, easy to manipulate, and unlikely to be immediately missed. His approach was deceptively gentle. He would present himself as a friendly stranger, a salesman, or a lost traveler, often offering small gifts or candy to gain their trust. Once he had lured a girl away from her community and into the seclusion of the jungle, his facade would drop. He would assault them, and in the process of the act, he would strangle them. His preferred method was manual strangulation, a direct and personal act that he would later describe as a moment of supreme control and release. After the murder, he would spend time with the bodies, a ritualistic act that spoke to the profound depths of his psychological disturbance. He would then leave the corpses where they lay, hidden by the dense undergrowth, a silent testament to his passage. He claimed to have killed over 100 girls in Peru before a flash flood uncovered a mass grave he had created. Fearing capture, he fled, crossing the border into Ecuador. Ecuador became the primary hunting ground for his darkest years. He continued his grim work, moving from town to town, always staying one step ahead of the authorities. The disappearances of young girls became an epidemic, a source of terror for rural communities. But a lack of communication between jurisdictions and a general lack of resources meant that a pattern was not immediately identified. He was a ghost, slipping through the cracks of a fragmented system. He later confessed that during his time in Ecuador, he was killing an average of 3 girls a week. He operated with a chilling efficiency, driven by a compulsion he seemed unable or unwilling to control. His downfall came not from brilliant detective work, but from a simple, fateful mistake. In April 1980, near the city of Ambato, Ecuador, he attempted to abduct a young girl who was with her mother. The mother fought back, screaming, and attracting the attention of a group of local market traders. They captured Lopez and, in their rage, were prepared to mete out their own justice. They beat him severely and were about to kill him when a passing police intervention intervened. He was taken into custody, a disheveled and unassuming man who did not fit the image of the monster the community was hunting. Initially, he was uncooperative, but as the evidence mounted and he was confronted with the scale of the disappearances, something shifted. Perhaps it was arrogance or a desire for notoriety. or simply a need to unburden himself of the horrors he had committed. He began to confess, and he did not stop with 1 or 2 murders. He confessed to over 110 killings in Ecuador alone. He then led investigators to a series of graves, a grim pilgrimage through the countryside that confirmed his words and shocked the nation. He then began to talk about his time in Peru and Colombia, eventually confessing to a total of over 300 murders. The sheer number was so staggering that many doubted its veracity. However, his detailed knowledge of crime scenes and the recovery of numerous bodies led to horrifying credibility to his claims. He was tried and found guilty in Ecuador. The country's legal system, however, had a maximum sentence limit. For his crimes, he was sentenced to the maximum penalty possible, 16 years in prison. He was incarcerated in a psychiatric prison in Quito. His time there was marked by bizarre behavior. He was considered a model prisoner, quiet and compliant. He studied psychology and philosophy, and even gave interviews to journalists, describing his crimes in a detached, analytical manner. He showed no remorse, viewing his actions as a necessary consequence of his own trauma and a dark destiny he was fulfilling. He was, by all accounts, a perfect inmate. This good behavior became the key to his freedom. In 1994, he was deemed legally sane and released early for good behavior.